Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus.
Welcome back to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Katie, and today we're exploring Exodus 16 through 18. In chapter 16, the Israelites leave the land of abundance in Elim and head towards Mount Sinai, where God will give them the 10 Commandments. In between, the Israelites wander in what is known as the wilderness of sin. Now, this does not directly mean sin as we know it, but the Israelites do wrestle with a lot of sin as they trek through. The wilderness was obviously not woodsy. It's not the plentiful scene that you might imagine. This wilderness is mostly desert, and they had to depend on God for basic needs like food and water. When hunger struck, they immediately cursed the Lord, wishing they could go back to Egypt. At least they had food in slavery, right? Yet again, God was near and He provided. He rained down bread from heaven and instructed the Israelites to gather what they needed. On the 6th day of the week, they would gather enough for the 7th. God instructed them not to gather on the 7th day, reminding them that He too rested on the 7th day of creation. They called this rest Sabbath. Everyone had just enough, no more or no less was needed. And the Israelites relied on this bread for the 40 years that they journeyed through the wilderness. They called it manna. As they continued their journey, water became scarce as well. Again, they complained and grumbled. They wished for Egypt. At least we had water there, they said. The Lord again miraculously cared for His people. He instructed Moses to gather elders of the community and head to a nearby rock. Moses struck the rock with his staff and watched water pour out for God's people to drink. God again proved His faithfulness to His people. Just when things started looking up, Israel was attacked by the Amalekites. As God's people battled, Moses, Aaron, and Hur watched from a nearby hilltop. When Moses raised his hands, Israel would triumph over their enemy. But when he lowered his hand, Amalek succeeded. So Moses raised his hands for the entire day. And as he grew tired, Aaron and Hur would support him on either side. Together, they defeated Amalek. In chapter 18, Moses reunites with his father-in-law Jethro, his wife, and his children. Moses tells story after story about how God has provided for them. They praise the Lord together as a family. During his visit, Jethro gave Moses some much-needed advice. So Moses was not only talking to God on behalf of Israel, he was also their chief judge as well, solving disputes among the people. Jethro suggested that Moses choose trustworthy, godly men to help him rule and govern God's people. And they did just that. There's nothing like some good advice, right? Israel took a big step towards becoming an organized nation. Our gospel connection this week is all about life's necessities, food and water. We all need it. The Israelites had to learn how to depend daily on God for the most basic of needs. They literally could not live without God providing manna and water. It's no coincidence that during His ministry, Jesus calls Himself the bread of life and the living water. In John, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life. No one comes to me who will ever be hungry." Jesus is telling us that only He can fulfill the ultimate need. Only He can satisfy the hunger that we have in every facet of life. A hunger for belonging, for rest, a hunger for peace. And He calls Himself the living water in John 4. The rock that Moses struck in these chapters is symbolic of the gospel. God literally struck Jesus so that we could drink freely from the waters of eternal life. Jesus reminds us that here in a relationship with Him is actually essential for living. And how can we apply these chapters to our life? Remember when Israel battled Amalek and Moses had to lift his hands in order to succeed? Imagine raising your hands above your head for 12 hours straight. That's some kind of workout. You'd get tired. Well, Moses had Aaron and Hur to uphold his hands whenever he couldn't by his own strength. This small portion of chapter 17 is exactly why we need community. Sometimes we just can't hold our hands up on our own, and that's okay. We need the help of faithful friends and family to help us fight our battles. Look around you. Who can you trust to help you in times of need? Do you let your needs be known? Real community is built on vulnerability. And in fact, through our vulnerability, we can deepen relationships. Through our relationships, we can encourage one another towards Christ. So this week, let someone hold up your hands. Don't be afraid to share your weaknesses.